Farming is the biggest contributor to climate change. Lord help us. I recently heard that comment in one of those videos where they asked simple-minded people on the street their opinions on specific topics or if they can find the state of Kansas on a map. This freaked me out a little bit because, well, I realized that the industrial farming industry contributes a net negative to the environment. Tossing out a blanket comment or statement like that, I think, is just very dangerous. It's dangerous because industries, via the influence they have on governments, are passing or attempting to pass an increased level of regulations and, in some cases, taxation on farming in an effort, in their words, to combat climate change. It seems that as long as you're doing X, Y, or Z to fight climate change, you can do whatever the hell you want, it appears. But before we get too deep into this, my name is Nicks-Erickson and welcome to The Foodivist, a continuing series of videos dedicated to our food, who controls our food, what is in our food, and the laws surrounding our food. So last week we discussed the American lobster and the battle between the National Marine Fisheries Service and the state of Maine. This week I want to discuss the recent craze in taxing cow herds. Within the last month, New Zealand became the first country to propose taxing ranchers on burping and peeing farm animals to combat climate change. The farm levy is a proposal that could help the country reach its pledge to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and become carbon neutral by 2050. To achieve that goal, the government has committed to cutting farm methane emissions by 10% by 2030 and up to 47% by 2050. Now, New Zealand is already one of the most environmentally friendly countries on Earth, and is also a country that is able to produce most of its food on its own shores, importing just 14% of its food product. That's great, no criticism there, except for the fact that New Zealand's retail market is highly consolidated, dominated by just two supermarket chains. I fear this tax will continue that march towards consolidation, and as Henry Kissinger said, who controls the food supply controls the people. Looking deeper into this proposal, which I've linked below, it doesn't appear, to me at least, that the actual tax is that well defined or isn't necessarily spelled out clearly. It appears that ministers are being given the authority to set the tax rates based on their findings or their desires. Now, this proposal has had a good number of critics. Some people, like me, believe that this will lead to an increase in food consolidation. Others feel that this will neuter the New Zealand cattle, sheep, and dairy industries and may help make it cost prohibitive to run that kind of business in that country. That in turn will lead to importing these items, which kind of counteracts the plan to lower greenhouse gases, as that product will now have to be shipped in from abroad, leading to higher food costs and additional CO2 emissions. Another point that is being made is that this plan would decimate rural communities in New Zealand. I mean, the government even mentions this in their proposal, or in its proposal. They say on page 66, and I'm quoting here, "Potential challenges could include a change in spending across rural communities and of quality of life. Potential social economic effects include, but are not limited to, a significant change in spending across rural communities, reduction in jobs or hours worked, further depopulation and accompanying decline in community services, overall reduction in quality of life, increased stress and mental health issues." Rural communities tend to have different demographics from the average, which could make them more exposed to the interactions of these potential impacts. For instance, an increase in isolation and a reduction of well-being may occur for people who are in a community affected by land use changes and who are unable to relocate. Federated Farmers, a lobbying group representing the industry, said in their statement, and I'm quoting here, "The greenhouse gas reduction plan released by the government will rip the guts out of small-town New Zealand, putting trees where farms used to be." They go on, "The government's rehashed plan to reduce on-farm greenhouse gas emissions throws out the 2.5 years of work the industry did to come up with a solution. Supposedly, all the time in a partnership with government to achieve a workable solution which would not reduce food production. Interestingly, the government proposal says the cost and availability to consumers of some foods and products may change, at least in the short term, as farmers, growers, and the wider agricultural sector adjust to internalizing the new cost on emissions. In the longer term, resulting shifts may result in greater availability of lower emission foods and products. While I couldn't find a document that spelled out what the government considers lower emission foods, I did find a study completed by the University of Otago, I think is how you say that. It is linked in the description box below, but it says what you would expect. And that is that beef, lamb, butter, pork, and cheese are bad for the environment. Soy milk, grains, sugary drinks, and something called processed foods, which should include soy milk, are good for the environment. They even say that in the report, and I'm quoting here, "Fortunately, foods that are health promoting tend to be those that are also climate friendly. Conversely, certain foods that carry known health risks are particularly climate polluting." That got me curious as to what types of foods the New Zealand government is recommending you eat. And again, that is what you would expect. They suggest you limit red meat consumption to 500 grams or less per week and instead eat more veggies. Just to confirm, 500 grams of meat is equivalent to 1 pound of ground beef. In addition, eat less butter and instead eat more vegetable oil and oil-based spread. My God, is that still a thing? Now, I took a picture because I knew you'd all think I was making it up. The New Zealand government is still recommending margarine for your health. Now let's jump back to the farmers' levy. In this same report, the government also mentioned that there would be an additional punishment, that's my word, not theirs, that I'm going to be quoting here, if agriculture emissions do not reduce as expected as a result of implementing this system, the agricultural sector should be required to pay for any shortfalls by funding additional domestic and international abatements. Regarding the actual tax amount, the government said if agriculture emissions are not priced, or if the price is too low to reduce emissions, New Zealand is unlikely to achieve its emissions reduction goals. In this event, the government will have choices about how to make up the shortfall. Other sectors may be required to pick up the shortfall in reductions needed. I wonder what that means. Maybe, under the guise of climate change, we should start a meat tax on all meat purchases. I kid. But that does open the door towards rolling out sales tax on foods that the government find unhelpful. And no, I don't think they'll start taxing sugary drinks or ultra-processed soy milk. They will go after cheeses like brie or steaks or butter. In fact, countries like Norway have started tracking all supermarket purchases to collect household consumption statistics to better inform tax policy. There's that word again. Why? Why does it seem that foods that will save the planet are also the same foods that will ensure future profits for the food industry, but foods that our ancestors have eaten for generations are suddenly being demonized? Until next week, I'm Nicks-Erickson, and thank you for watching.